Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to the September 13, 2021 council meeting of the City of Mayfield Heights. Tonight, tonight we mourn the loss of one of our fellow council members, Donna Finney. Before we move on to regular business, I ask that everyone take a moment of silence to honor the many dedicated years of service to our community. Thank you. Donna, you will be missed. And as she would say, let's get on with business. Mrs. Lloyd, may I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Balestria. Mr. DeJohn.
Here.
Mr. Mano.
Here.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Here.
Mrs. Snyder.
Here.
Mrs. Teresi.
Here.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next, we will move to the approval of the minutes from the Committee of the Whole of August 23rd, 2021. I hope everyone has had time to read the minutes over. Is there a motion to approve as the minutes?
Moved.
Moved by Mr. Mano, second by Mrs. Sabetta. Are there any suggested changes, amendments, or deletions to those minutes? Mrs. Teresi.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. On page 4, the third from the last paragraph, it says, Mr. Teresi asked about the corporate park, and it was really me who asked, so
Okay,
we probably ought to change that.
we could make that change. Thank you. Okay, any other changes? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nay. These minutes have been approved as written. Next is the approval of the minutes from the council meeting August 23rd, 2021. I hope everyone has had time to read these minutes over. Is there a motion to approve the minutes? Moved by Mr. Balestria, second by Mrs. Sabetta. Are there any suggested changes or deletions to those minutes? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nay. And these minutes have now been approved as written. Does any member at this time have any correspondence or announcements? Mrs. Sabetta.
Thank you, Madam President. I would just like to say that the Chagrin River Watershed will have their meeting via Zoom tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other correspondence or announcements from council? Okay, moving to reports of offices, starting with the mayor, but he is not going to be here with us this evening, so I could move to Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have no report tonight, but I will request that at the end of regular business, a motion be made to move into executive session to discuss pending or imminent litigation and the appointment of a public official. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Murphy? Okay. We'll wait for Mrs. Fagan to come back.
It's her report.
It's a report, yeah.
I should have kept talking.
Yeah. You don't have anything else to say?
Sorry. I could sing, but that'd clear the room.
How about the Browns?
Good game.
Thank you. That was your report. Okay. Director of Finance, Mrs. Fagan.
I apologize for
not being here. I have no report this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will move to reports of committees, commissions, and boards, starting with the Building Committee, Mrs. Tressi.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have no report this evening.
Okay, Finance and Audit Committee, Mr. Balestrea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no report as the Finance Committee has not met, but there are a couple financial matters before us this evening.
Thank you. Legislative Committee, Mr. Mano.
I have no report, thank you.
Public Works and Service Committee, Mr. DeJohn.
I hate to spoil the fun, but I do have a report. Yes, I'm going to report on a meeting we had on July 29th. That was a lengthy meeting. We met for almost 3 hours. And the first thing on the agenda was the dye testing results for Marnell and the Ascot areas. The engineering firm AECom and their representative, Mr. Bells, who's an expert on flooding, was hired by our engineer, Mr. Gerson, to study the problems in these areas. He has seen many flooding problems throughout the communities in our county. AECom conducted mainline dye testing in the public areas, in these areas, this past spring. He gave a good explanation of how the sewers work and why they flood. Mr. Bells found only a few areas that were problematic, and there weren't a lot of leaks in the public area sewer lines. The few leaks that were found can be fixed by grouting the public line joints, and that will be completed by us, the city. The problem of basement flooding is most likely coming from private property sewer lines. Mr. Bell suggested that the city develop a pilot program that involves testing private properties and formulating a program on what to do with the results of that study. Specifically, who will pay to have the private properties repaired? Mr. Bells also noted that some of these private properties have been previously repaired by homeowners by basement waterproofing, adding backflow preventers, and adding clay pipe, or replacing clay pipe with the new PVC pipes. However, Mr. Bells said that that necessarily may not correct the problem for the other homeowners, since other adjoining properties that haven't been fixed contribute to the repaired properties for flooding. So it's a very complicated situation, if that all makes sense. But basically what he's saying is somebody may repair their property, but that doesn't mean that it's not going to flood, because other properties may be flooding, the repaired properties flooding. So I'm going to ask the engineer to arrange for a meeting with the residents in the Marnell and Ascot areas. I did get a call. They were asking for this meeting to explain this problem to the residents and get their feedback on a course of action. And once we get that feedback from residents, I will again meet with Mr. Bells and Mr. Gerson to develop a pilot program and decide on who will pay for the repairs. I also asked Mr. Gerson and Mr. Bells what other cities in the county are doing for the flooding problem, and they will provide me with that data. However, keep in mind that other cities' financial means may not be the same as our financial means. We did have a few residents attend this meeting, and one resident asked how the new mainland development might add to the problem in the Marnell area, and Mr. Gerson assured him that he will monitor that development and he will help to protect the adjoining areas. So following this meeting, Mr. Gerson will prepare, I hope you will prepare a letter for solicitation as a pilot, of volunteers for the pilot program, as well as examples of other pilot programs throughout the county. Next on the agenda was the apron replacement policy. Mr. Gerson added this to the agenda since he received a complaint from a resident on Gates Mills Boulevard that was mad that their apron was not replaced and his neighbor's apron was replaced. Mr. Gerson explained that aprons get replaced when the finished grade is above 2 inches. Mr. Gerson will formulate a policy, and all residents will be given this prior to any street reconstruction. I also ask that photos be taken to be used as supporting documentation when aprons are replaced. Last on the agenda was the pavement condition rating. Mr. Gerson stated that the condition rating was last updated in 2019, and he wants again to update this for the 2022 road program. This guide is used to determine which streets will be repaired in the city. This rating will be done before the end of the year, and Mr. Gerson will present a proposal from the rating on the streets that need to be repaired for 2022. Also at the meeting were 3 residents from Woodhawk asking that their street be repaired. They want Woodhawk repaired as soon as possible so the city and county do not try to pursue a bike path on their street in the next few years. The residents want the street to be reconstructed, totally reconstructed with concrete, something that I am in favor of also. Mr. Gerson explained that to these residents that Woodhawk was scheduled to be narrowed and a bike path added. The city would have received grant money for this project from NOACA. However, since this money was taken away by NOACA because the residents didn't want the path, his proposal for a concrete base repair with asphalt overlay was recommended. In addition, the street needs to be assessed again in his new rating system, which he will be doing, to see where it falls on the list. Initially, it was put up on the list because of the bike path and the narrowing of the street. Many residents on the street want it repaired. I am in favor of base repairs. However, Mr. Gerson is not in favor of concrete base repairs because he said adding a layer of asphalt makes the street smoother and prevents waffling. When Mayfield Road is an example of a street that had only base repairs done to it, and he believes that this is waffling. A resident asked why not complete a total reconstruction of the street, and again, Mr. Gerson explained that a total reconstruction will cost close to $2 million, and that is not the city's policy to totally reconstruct streets. So to end the meeting, Mr. Gerson will be doing this rating system and getting back to the Public Works and Service Committee with his recommendations for the 2022 program. Thank you. Hope that wasn't too long. It's a long meeting.
Mr. DeJohn.
I tried to make it shorter, but
That's okay. Are there any questions for Mr. DeJohn? Okay. Parks and Recreation, Mr. Mano.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. We'll keep the ball rolling. We had a great summer bringing back many of our annual events, and the recreation staff is now turning our attention to fall. This past weekend, we held the second annual community garage sale and had 46 participating locations. I was involved in one of those sales, and I have to tell you, the feedback was tremendous. People were really pleased with the city doing that, and got a lot of people came. So hopefully that'll continue on into the future. Registration is now open for the following youth programs. LBJ Basketball Leagues, grades K1, boys grades 2-3, girls grades 2-4. The cost is $70 per participant. Little Spikers Volleyball, for the cost for ages 5 to 7 years and 8 to 12 years. The cost is $75 per participant. For our seniors 60 plus, we are starting up our drive-up dinners again. Our September dinner provided by Parkside Grill is sold out. Our next dinner will be on October 12th, featuring K-Station Catering. The menu is kielbasa with sauerkraut, 2 pierogies, green beans, and dessert for $5. Residents may register beginning on September 15th. For more information on these programs, please contact the Recreation Department at 440-442-2627 or visit the website. Also, I will be giving a short update after your, at this point, I want to let you know that Mr. Ward will be giving a update on the trail projects that we have run the grants for. And that's the end of my report.
Thank you, Mr. Mano. Mr. Ward.
So, just wanted to give you an update on the trails and where we're at on that. We've applied for and been approved of 3 grants. The first one was the Marcel Underpass, which is 95% done. We need to replace the lighting with LED lights, and Mr. Gerson is working on that and with ODOT, and that should be happening shortly. The second grant that we received was the intersection improvements, the TLCI grant. We are going to be working on 5 intersections, and that Mr. Gerson again is working with ODOT to get those plans finalized so that we can get that work done right after the school year is over, because we're going to be doing SOM and Ridgeberry, which is right by the middle school, and also Ridgeberry by the high school, so we want to wait till the school year's out. And then finally, we were approved for the Gates Mills Boulevard plan. Dan will be coming next week with a plan or we'll be asking for approval at the next council meeting so that Dan can go out to start doing the design plans for the Gates Mills Boulevard plan. So again, that will be scheduled to be done next year. So that's where we're at currently with the 3 grants. I kind of was looking to just bring it up to the group. Our goal is ultimately to get that trail to our new pool and community center as soon as possible. So if city council is not in favor of that, we can stop right now. But if you're still in favor of it, when the monies become available, we will continue to apply and seek out grants to make that happen. So I don't know if anyone feels strongly one way or the other about not doing that.
Does any member of council, Mr. DeJohn?
I do have one question. You talked about possibly putting the trail on the south side of Marsall Road. I just wanted to know, we widened the north part of the bridge. How are you going to get past the south part of the bridge?
Well, first off, we're not sure that we can do the south side of the road whenever that time comes. We're looking into it. There's a lot of moving parts. The thought is to cross over, if we go on the south side of the road, right where that gravel apron is that has not been concreted, cut across to the north side, and then head up, continue west on Marsall, if we're able to get there. But there's, like I said, there's a lot of moving parts that we're still trying to figure out.
So, I do have another question, but you can come back.
Mr. Vano?
I have several questions I want to ask, and a couple of things that I think really need to be talked about. First of all, on the overpass on Marsall, is ODOT going to replace that lighting, or is the city going to replace that lighting? Because I talked to the number 2 guy at ODOT, and he knew nothing about those lightings being changed.
Yeah, so we currently have a permit application in ODOT District 12 for the permit to replace the lightings. The lights underneath the bridge are the city responsibility, and that is part of the Marsall Underpass project. So we have the contractor in-house, which is the contractor that did the project. So once we have the permit, then they can finish those lighting under the bridge.
I thought that lighting was all part of that renovation.
That is the project I'm referring to.
I mean, NOACA is the one that pushed that forward, and why wouldn't that have been included?
So the lighting that's being done on the bridge, it's a replacement of the existing wall packs that are on the bridge now, underneath the underpass. And that is the project that was the Marsall Underpass, which was the Cuyahoga Municipal Grant project.
All right.
So that project is still underway, and we separated the permit just because there were 2 avenues on the construction. We had to get the construction of the road done to meet the grant requirements. We've expended that money, so we could get reimbursement for that. And then the lighting was the second part, and so we have the permits into ODOT, and we had a response from them on 8/23, which was asking for more information on the lights. So as soon as we have that permit in hand, then those lights will be replaced.
Two other things concerning that overpass. I've had several phone calls from people about A, the garbage on the other side of that wall that continues to build up, and B, at both ends of that area that we refurbished, the vegetation has grown all the way down to the sidewalk. And people are in fear in the evening hours of traversing that area because anybody can be hiding in that tall grass and so on, and they're concerned about it. That grass, all of that should be taken back at least 10 feet, if not more. It should be cleared back. And the third item and final item, in your preparation for Gates Mills Boulevard, I understand that there's going to be some swales produced in there. I will say this to you, based on what I've heard from residents over there. If there's any attempt to turn that boulevard into some kind of a park-like setting, I will oppose it. You want to put a plain trail in there, fine. But I don't want to see any kind of mounding and stuff done there to try to create a park-like situation there. The folks that live along that boulevard want that kept as natural as it is. They don't want it changed. So I'm just letting you know that before you start preparing what you're going to come before us in. And the very last thing is on the trails. I've discussed the trails at length with Sean and with other people. My feeling is this: Som Center Road and Marsall Road are no places to put trails. The traffic volume is tremendous. It's dangerous. Som Center is a two-lane road. Where are you going to put these trails that they will be safe? And I truly do not believe that people are going to bike or walk on those particular trails to come to our pool. So, I mean, this is just something that I've thought about over and over again. I don't know if we could really justify the cost of doing that for what we'd get out of it. And that's what I have to say.
If I could hopefully just respond quickly to a couple of your points, just to hopefully clarify some of them. On the Gates Mills Trail, so right now you have a grant that you applied for that had some amenities in there. In amenities, I think they were trash receptacles, dog garbage pickup points. But what I would say is that, just to refresh everybody's memory, we'll bring a proposal for the design, and I think we ought to just go through that plan and make sure that what's going in there is what council wants to see there, just so we're clear before we get into the design. I think that would probably help everybody be clear, and that if there's something in there that is not wanted, then we can obviously either amend that or discuss how we don't put it in, or if there's something missing that you want to see in there. Does that make sense for that?
Yeah.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I just had a quick question, or not, I guess a comment. When we do move forward with some of these plans, the way the plan is proposed to us, if there's going to be a change, can you notify us as opposed to just, because this wall under the underpass, the appearance is not what we were given in the original.
Sure.
I had asked Sean about it, and it was supposed to be like a brickwork, not like a, I don't know, I can't even describe, a patterned wall, and now it's just a solid barrier. The appearance isn't what it looked like when you brought it to us. So in the future, when we start making these plans, if there's going to be changes like that, can you just address it and just let us know so that we can tell people if they see pictures online why it didn't happen? That would be really helpful, because I was super surprised to see what the wall looked like. I loved what you proposed to us, and then when it didn't go up, and then the lights weren't the lights that were proposed to us, it's kind of just made,
Yeah,
not
understood.
for a
I
great
think
situation.
there was a disconnect between who made the application. It wasn't us, but what required by ODOT with the walls were different than what the walls wanted in there, so I do apologize for not bringing that to your attention. We were following ODOT standard on the wall that needed to be in there, but clear point for sure.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Tracy?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Gerson, also or Sean, I feel like there's a problem if you bring this trail along from Sam onto Marsal, and you, let's just say you have children riding their bike to the pool, because I believe that's your end result, is having people get to the pool. So they could be coming from Marsal or Sam Center, Gates Mills, wherever. But when you have the traffic on Marsal, you're going to have children on a bike, could be, on a bicycle crossing from one side of the street to the other. I don't know that the cars heading east on Marsal would pay any attention to a child on a bike that's crossing from one side to the other, from the trail to the sidewalk. I find that to be an accident waiting to happen, honestly. I don't know that that's the smart thing to do. And then my other question is, tell me the 5 intersections that we're going to work on.
Let me see if I can go by memory here. So the first one is Som Center and Mayfield Road,
Sam and Mayfield.
Chelmsford / Commonwealth and Mayfield Road, Ridgeberry and Som Center Road. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, I said Ridgeberry and Som. So Mayfield and Som. I think that was the first one I said. I may have misspoke on it.
Sam and
So let
Mayfield.
me start over. Make sure we got them. Sorry. So
Sam and Mayfield.
Som and Mayfield,
Ridgeberry.
Chelmsford
And
/
Mayfield.
Commonwealth and Mayfield. That's 2. Ridgeberry and Som. That's 3. Fourth one is the mid-block crossing at Ridgeberry at the school crossing, and so it's just the west of Commonwealth,
Washington?
clear near Washington. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, and the fifth one is connecting Som Center south of the traffic circle to the gas station area. So it'd be crossing Mayfield or crossing Gates Mills Boulevard, because there's no connection through there, across Woodhawk, across that gas station, and stopping at the corner of the Acacia.
Acacia
Yeah,
Cemetery, okay.
so I think those are the 5, if I'm not mistaken.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. DeJohn?
So just one last question for Sean. So, Sean, you know, I grew up in this city. I know it was covered wagon days when I grew up in the city, but you know, I used to ride every day from my house on Lander Road up to the pool and back. I used sidewalks. Why do we need special trails now? And my mother used to tell me, stay out of the street, stay on the sidewalk. Why do we need special trails for people to ride their bikes around the city? I just don't understand that. I know it was years ago, and I see these trails all around the city of Cleveland, right? Do I see a lot of bikes on them? Usually not. I don't know. Does anyone here see a lot of bikers on these trails? No.
Cyclists
I mean, your
usually ride
serious
in the
bikers,
street.
I mean, you'll see them in packs, you know, on Saturday mornings or Sunday mornings, but, you know, why do we need all these trails and spend all this money when we have sidewalks throughout the whole city?
So it's not a bike trail, it's a multi-purpose trail, so you can walk on there, you can walk your dog, you can rollerblade, you can jog, you can ride your bike. And if you're coming down the road and you're trying to make it to something that we're putting a lot of money into, so let's just look at it from, if you live on Gates Mills Boulevard, you don't have a sidewalk. So we're giving you a sidewalk, a nice wide sidewalk, so you can walk your dog and someone coming the opposite way on their bike or jogging or rollerblading or whatever can pass, right? It's nice and wide like it is in the metro parks. And then you come down Som, and again, we're trying to get those, be able to get those people from the south side to our park. We're gonna put a huge investment into our park, not only the pool, the community center, but ultimately, hopefully, the fields as well. And so there's a destination that we're putting a lot into. And so this will allow you to get there. And, you know, you don't have to drive off the path on the side when your bike's going one way and someone else's bike is coming the other way. And it's just, you know, as a parent, and thank you for that comment, as a parent, I want my kid to be able, I want to be able to say to my kid, go to the pool and feel like he's gonna get there safely. On a 10-foot wide trail that is off the road, is not on the road, so on Som, there's very wide tree lawns. So the 10-foot wide trail would be from the sidewalk forward. There's still probably 20 feet of green space between where the trail would end and the road would be. So going down Som, you'd have a nice wide road for bikers, joggers, people walking their dogs, and then cut across. And now that's remains to be seen what side we go on, but you could put a, what do you call it, is it a flashing beacon? You know, the crosswalk like you see at Ridgeberry. You know, for people crossing Ridgeberry to get to the high school, it would be a similar situation. To get across the street and then continue on to our park and our recreational amenities. So,
Sean, why couldn't we put the trail down on the north side of Marsal? Because that
so
sidewalk
there's a
is
couple
really.
options. I personally, if I'm fighting for something, I'm fighting for safety, and as I see it, the south side would be the best way to go, but there's a lot of hurdles that we have to climb. On the north side, there's not a lot of room between the sidewalk and Marsal, and then additionally, you got all those people flying out of the apartments, and they have to come out pretty far before they can see,
Yeah.
and that could be dangerous.
True.
So if we could secure an easement with the cemetery, that, you know,
The best.
again, easier said than done, but it's something that we, in my opinion, we should look at.
Okay.
So, and Don, to answer your question, I know we talked last week, I talked with Tony, he's gonna cut that grass back. He said he would take care of that, and they have had guys in there cleaning, and we'll just have to do a more routine, regular maintenance of that area, so.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions? Did you want to say, yeah?
Yeah, just to follow up, and Sean and I kind of talked, and we wanted to bring it up to you, about the trails, because we want to make sure that we're being transparent for you, and if these are all good conversations, we just want to make sure before we move forward, if there's concerns, or if you don't want to move forward, then obviously let us know. That was, I think, our thought of bringing it to you today, so we're not hitting you up and saying, well, why didn't you tell us? So these are all good conversations, north side, south side. Sean and I go back and forth on that, on which side we've looked at it, but we haven't spent any money looking at it at this point. And so before we spend more time and effort, that's our thought is, how do you guys feel? What do you want the city to look like? Trails or not, maybe no trails, I don't know. So that was our thought,
Okay.
so we
Mrs.
appreciate
Tressi?
your time and comments.
So it seems like when you talk about the south side, and that's the side by Miklas and the grassy area, have you done like your due diligence about obtaining that property? I mean, I believe
Yeah,
some of
so-
it belongs to the city,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
I don't
so-
believe it all belongs to the city.
Yeah, so the only thing we've done is we just looked at it aerial through the county, kind of seen what areas we've driven down and said, hey, there's a obstacle here. We haven't had any conversations with the cemetery at this point, so obviously that would be a conversation we'd have to go, but if we got here and we said, majority said, hey, I don't want it on the south side no matter what, then that saves us a step. But if you say, hey, I like the north side, I like the south side, but this, then we could make that step. So it's really trying to just gauge your thoughts on it and how we go. We frankly, I would say if you guys said the south side and the cemetery said no way, we would probably have to not do it on the south side, obviously. If, there's obstacles to the north side, like the concern is the apartment buildings coming out of there, that's obviously a concern. I think there's 2 or 3 drives there. That's a hurdle there, but some are overcomable, some aren't, but obviously we have right away on the north side.
So would it be a better idea to do your due diligence first before coming to us
Yeah,
and
yeah.
asking, for, the path? would it be, would it be wiser to see if you can obtain the property from the, I mean, we're going to vote on it, and then you're going to go back and find out you're not going to be able to obtain any of this property anyway. So why wouldn't you do your due diligence first and then come to us and say, we want to put a path, we know we can do this. I mean, it was the same thing with Woodhawk. You wanted to put the trail, but you had no idea if you were able to go through into the corporate park and obtain that property. So to me, I would put the horse before the cart and do your due diligence. And after your due diligence is done, come back and ask us what we think. I know it's probably more work for you because you have to do that first, but I think it's, my own personal opinion, I think it's a little smarter to do due diligence first. You do that you're doing it with the pool. You're doing due diligence, and then you're going to decide if this is going to work or not.
Yeah, our thought would be, and we could be wrong, but our thought would be we want to present it to you and say, hey, we'd like to explore these ideas. And so if we went to the cemetery and they called you up and said, hey, do you know Dan and Sean are over here talking, and you said no, we didn't hear anything about it, at least oh yeah, we've talked to them. We don't know which way we're going, but we just want to explore the options. So if we're wrong, we apologize, but we just wanted to kind of get it open to you so you see what you want to say. Or if you say, hey, I don't want you going to the cemetery, we don't want it, then obviously we wouldn't go to them. So it's more just trying to keep it open so that you're aware of what we're looking at.
Thanks, Dan.
Okay, thank
So
you.
I guess I'm asking this council to think about the discussions that we've had tonight and email Mr. Gerson or Mr. Ward so that they're not wasting their time. If everybody's really not on board with this, rather than them go out and do all this footwork, if we're really not going to ever move in that direction, I think that that's what they're asking. They're trying to just get an idea from all of us, and I think go home, think about it, give yourself a week or not a week, a couple days, and just email them your questions or concerns. I'm sure you might have more after tonight. Really think it through so that before they go out and do all of this work, they have an idea as to whether or not this council will move forward with any kind of trails in the city. And I know you had your hand up.
Yeah, just one last question. Mr. Gerson, you live in Lake County.
Yes, sir.
And in a very progressive city. Do you have these trails all over your city? I don't want to tell everyone where you live, but that's why I didn't mention the city, but I know it's a progressive city.
They've been doing bike trails. They have some, what do you call, multi-purpose trails? They have a lot of parks. I would say, and I'll just be honest, I'm a gray engineer, not because of my hair, but I like the old school stuff. But they're popular in a lot of cities. There's a lot of cities that are looking to get residents to City Hall, to pools. Sidewalks were the way of the old ways ago. I'm not saying they're not still functional, but there are a lot of cities that I see that are spending money for multi-purpose trails. Does that mean that's right for Mayfield Heights? That's really a question. You guys got to tell us what you want. We'll go with whatever direction you want, or if you have questions, we can try to bring thoughts back. Obviously, the next question is if we said, hey, yeah, let's get from A to B, and if there's only one way to get there, then the next question is cost, and then are there grants for it, and then what's the timeline maybe? So our eyes are wide open. We're obviously just want to kind of see some feedback, and if you feel one way or another, or if you have questions about why you feel that way, maybe we can change your mind, maybe we can't, or maybe what we say changes your mind to the other side. So, but that's I think our goal tonight. It wasn't to ambush you. If we didn't mean to do that if we did, but
Thank you.
thanks.
Thank you. Sean, did you have something else? Okay. All right, thank you. We will move on to Safety and Transportation Committee. Mrs. Sabetta.
Thank you, Madam President. Chief Elliott has secured an Assistant to Firefighters grant. A memo will be sent to council with further information, and the committee is recommending this item be placed on the September 27th agenda. Thank you.
Just one thing, it's not going to cost us very much either, right? What, $1,100?
Little over 1,000.
Yeah.
And we're getting 22,000.
right, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Board of Zoning Appeals, Mrs. Sabetta.
Thank you again. The BZA will meet tomorrow here in council chambers at 7 p.m. There are 2 items on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Sabetta. Planning Commission, Mr. Ballestrea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Planning Commission did not meet because of lack of agenda, so I have no report.
Thank you. All right, we will now move to comments from the public. Pursuant to city code, each person will be allotted 5 minutes to speak, with a maximum of 30 minutes allowed for the entire public portion. If you are here in connection with an agenda item this evening, this is your opportunity to address council. If you would like to be heard this evening, please raise your hand and be recognized. Then approach the podium. Please state your name and address for the record. It is now 7:45. Mr. Hoffman?
Thank you, Madam President, Chair, members of council. I'm Andrew W. Hoffman. I'm here representing Eastgate Shopping Center, and I'm here only to give an overview and an update about what's been happening at the center. It's been a long time since I've appeared before this council, and I just wanted to reintroduce myself and tell you what's happening. Obviously, in the broadest possible perspective, these are interesting times for shopping centers and malls. We made it through the last 18 months. This journey is certainly not over, but as you know, the vacancy we had from Bed Bath & Beyond happened before the pandemic. The only tenant turnover we had was Fox and Hound, but that was actually a result of my doing and not the restaurants. We do have a replacement, and one of these months we expect them to start work finally on getting their restaurant ready. But while we've retained all of the other tenants, and I think that puts us in good stead compared to a lot of other shopping centers, it came at a big price. We had to give a lot of concessions, both to those of our tenants who really needed it and others who just had the leverage to do so as their leases were coming up for renewal. But we were willing to do it because we understand that the worst thing you can have is turnover. So with respect to the Bed Bath vacancy, I literally spent a year from July 2020 to July 2021 negotiating a potential lease with a very well-known national tenant. They canceled the deal twice, and then finally for a third time in late July. At that time, they canceled all of their Northeast Ohio deals that were in various stages of completion. Having been jilted for the third time, it didn't hurt as much, but it means I'm back to square one with leasing. We still are selective in a very shrinking tenant market in who we will rent to. We will not rent to anybody who will compete with any of our local longtime tenants. We've been steadfast on that, and that's not going to change. So stay tuned. Hopefully we'll have good news sooner than later. The second point is that we are going to finally complete the canopy project at the south end of the center, which initially involved demolishing the canopy for several reasons. Most importantly, the canopy was well beyond its useful life and was becoming unsound structurally. Second, it is more the current look to not have canopies in shopping centers. And what we are going to do as we replace it is refinish those stores in a way that's consistent with the rest of the shopping center. The Architectural Board of Review has approved the design. We're also going to add landscaping and to make it a more hospitable place for shoppers. The third item, and it's a small one, is that we are hopeful that we will be installing 4 electric vehicle chargers at a point of the shopping center near Micro Center, closest to Somme Center Road, in a way that will not disrupt traffic flow, but will also acknowledge the fact that this is a trend that's happening. Other centers have them. I don't know that any other center in Mayfield Heights does. I'm just simply not aware one way or the other. But I think it's a good thing the company that's doing it has chargers that work for all cars. They're not restricted to one type of electric vehicle. It's a pretty tasteful presentation, if you will, and we're happy about that. They're coming before the Architectural Review Board this Thursday. That's what I have. I just wanted to, again, reacquaint myself with you and let you know what's happening at Eastgate.
Thank you so much for
Thank you.
updating us. I can ask council if they have any questions. Would you be open
Sure,
to answering?
sure.
Does any member of council have, Mr. Balestria?
Yeah, Mr. Hoffman, any ideas about when you're doing the landscape plan, about doing some of those embanked parking areas with green space to separate? Really don't need as much parking in the plaza, obviously, as you had in years past. So can we utilize a plan that'll introduce a lot of, something more in the line of what Mayfield Town Center did, with that kind of
I'm only smiling because I never thought I'd see the day where City Council would tell me I have too much parking, because I've been doing this for a long time now. But
for certain people, let's say.
the two issues, and this question has been asked before of me, is that many of our national tenants have certain parking ratios that they insist on. And if we started removing parking, we would run afoul of that. That's the first thing. The second thing is, we do have a lot of traffic in and out of the center because we still have a lot of good draws, thankfully. And when we start sectioning off areas, it starts getting more complex for vehicle movement throughout. And we do have pedestrians coming through the center too. And there is no question it would make, if we were to fully redo it, it would make it a more desirable place. And someone on the Architectural Review Board suggested that I tear down a number of the stores and just create more of a public green space. That's a problem for us. But I understand the concept, and the third thing, actually, one other thing, is that we went through a period about 8 to 10 years ago where a number of the tenants didn't like us having the landscaping that we did have, more in the way of trees and tall grasses, because they felt that it restricted the visibility of their store from the street. I think that's ridiculous, but that was something we had to contend with. So it's a complex issue. In spirit, I have no problem with it, but the practicalities of it and the legalities of it in terms of our leases make it difficult. If you're starting from scratch, it's a different story.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming out tonight.
Thank you.
Giving us this update. Would anyone else like to be heard this evening?
Well, thank you. Rick Warby, Woodhawk Drive, resident here. Since no one else wants to say something, I'll come up and say something. Thank you, gentlemen, for what you guys just mentioned today. Sean, do you live in Mayfield? Okay.
Wait,
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
Just
Is that
address
wrong?
council, please.
Sorry about that, sorry. One of my concerns is, sorry about that, but when I come to some of these meetings, I'm hearing some of the plans that they're coming up with, they're not even residents here. And my concern is, I like what Ms. Teresi has said about maybe coming to the board and maybe presenting some of these plans first before bringing them on here, for discussion. So, I mean, it'd be nice if some of these folks, they came to us, the residents, because from what I'm hearing, you've got something going on in Gates Mills Boulevard that may be affecting us in the Woodhawk area. So, I mean, just going forward, it'd be nice if some of these plans were made available to you folks at council, because it seems like you don't know about them half the time. I mean, that's the gist that I'm getting from them. I should have started off with condolences to the passing of your fellow council member, though. I know of of Donna and the family as well, and, you know, it's tragic, but also relay my condolences to her and her family as well.
Thank you.
Going back to the bike trails, Woodhawk Drive, the connectability and all that, I just don't see the usage by many of the avid bikers on using these bike trails that are being presented. And even from what I'm hearing tonight, connecting Psalm Center through Marcel to the community center. It sounds like a great idea, but I'm still, as a resident of Woodhawk Drive, I still see it as a community, a local street. I don't see the significance of having a bike trail through that community. I do get it going through Psalm Center Road, maybe a little bit of Cedar and Lander. Those are main thoroughfares. I've seen them in other cities. New York City has them around, right, the West Side Highway and all that. And even in downtown Manhattan, a lot of those bikes that were presented years ago for usage by the residents, they just sat there unused. I know recently, late last year, early this year, it was presented to me when I first inquired about this, about the property values of Woodhawk Drive. I'd be all for it if, for some weird reason, the property value significantly went up. That would assure me that a study was done, but what I got back from someone as a comparison on what property values could be like was a study done in Indianapolis, Indiana, which is like the capital of Indiana. And when I looked at it, it wasn't successful. And I could send you that program that was sent to me as a comparison. It was supplied to me, right? And that was on my question of what are the property values going to be like if this is done in Woodhawk? And so I guess the due diligence, you know, I mean, I would just wish that these, you know, when these things are proposed to you folks on city council, you got them a little bit earlier, you could digest it a little bit more, and then have a more, you know, fact-finding meeting. When I come to these, it seems like you folks are not hearing all the details. And that's pretty much what I want. I mean, hopefully you'll see the new proposals that were presented today. I'll even send you information on my thoughts and maybe some of my fellow residents on the street if they want to send them to you as well. But please give us some thought. It does impact us. I get it. You want green spaces, but I think the first thing is ask your residents or find out, you know, from your residents if it works or not. I'll leave it with this. It was just mentioned about going on Psalm Center Road, and if the cemetery was against it, or maybe they didn't want to go through with it, that they would just stop it. Had that been done with us on Woodhawk Drive, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about this, because we petitioned everyone on the street, or for the most part, most people don't want it done, and even the condo association doesn't want it done. So I'm asking you folks to, you know, please consider it, get all the facts, and to these gentlemen, I applaud you for your job, right? But I mean, I wish it was a little bit of a different process here. It just seems like you don't get all the information, and then you're voting on it blindly. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Warby. Perfect. Is there anybody else that would like to be heard this evening? Okay. It is 7:55. I will close the public portion and move on to regular business. We'll begin with Resolution 2021-71. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Resolution 2021-71, a resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement with Marquee Showcase Productions, 737 Spofford Oval, Sagamore Hills, Ohio, 44067, to create, set up, and manage a youth theater program in the city and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Balestrea. Second. Do I have a second? Mrs. Tressi. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. Mano,
No.
Mr. Balstria,
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn,
No.
Mrs. Sabetta,
No.
Mrs. Teresi,
No.
Mrs. Snyder.
No. So this will, we don't have enough, oh, wait.
It's on first reading.
Yeah, but we will place this on first reading.
Um,
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes, I did call this organization, and there's some miscommunication between the organization and the city because they said they're not coming into the city. And I called them to find out what their fees were for exactly. I can't remember off the top of my head how much those fees were. What,
$10,000.
$10,000, that's what. And I did print off one of their brochures for the city, but they said they're not coming into the city. So I think we need to look into that before we take this any further.
So it's on first reading. We'll have Mr. Ward check into it. If they call back, then we know. Okay,
Don't bother.
okay. All right, moving
Thank
to thank you. Resolution number 2021-72, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Resolution 2021-72, a resolution requesting the county fiscal officer to advance real property taxes from the proceeds of tax levies pursuant to Section 321.34 of the Ohio Revised Code. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules? Moved by Mrs. Tressi, second by Mrs. Sabetta. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. DeJohn,
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi,
Yes.
Mr. Balstria,
Yes.
Mr. Mano,
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta,
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Mano, second by Mr. Balestrea. Mrs. Fagan, is there anything you'd like to discuss with this?
Certainly, this is pretty much just a housekeeping piece of legislation that is required by the county every year. What it does is, during the course of the year, as they collect our property tax dollars, they advance those to us, rather than us waiting to their normal twice-a-year distributions.
Perfect, thank you. Is there any questions from council? All right, roll call on the motion to approve.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mr. Balstria.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Resolution 2021-72 has been approved. Resolution number 2021-73, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Resolution 2021-73, a resolution accepting the amounts and rates as determined by the Budget Commission and authorizing the necessary tax levies and certifying them to the county fiscal officer. First reading.
Thank you. Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Tressi, second by Mrs. Sabetta. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. Balstria.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Balestrea, second by Mrs. Tressi. I will also refer this to Mrs. Fagan.
Thank you. This is the second housekeeping piece of legislation required by the county. It's the next step in the tax budget that was approved by council back in July, I believe. And this just takes the information from that tax budget and sets our tax rates for the upcoming tax year.
And sets them. Okay. Any questions from council? Thank you. Okay, roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. Balstria.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes, this resolution has been adopted. We will now move to ordinances, beginning with ordinance number 2021-29. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ordinance number 2021-29, an ordinance providing consent to the Ohio Director of Transportation to complete the various transportation projects in the city of Mayfield Heights listed in the ordinance and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
Moved.
Moved by Mrs. Sabetta, second by Mr. Balestrea. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. Balstria.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn.
No.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Belstrea, second by Mrs. Sabetta. This is an ordinance for the resurfacing of Som Center Road. This would be resurfacing from Cedar Road to Mayfield Road. Is there any further questions or comments? Mr. DeJohn?
The reason I wanted to put this on readings, so you all know, so we have a blank piece of paper here, basically doesn't tell us anything. I did talk with Mr. Gerson and asked him if this is necessary that we get this done tonight. He said no, it could go on readings. This is not going to be a project done until next year anyways. I did talk with Mrs. Fagan. She said she thinks it's approximately $238,000 that we have to come up with on this project, but there's other sources that will be funding this. Don't you think we all need to know how much total this is going to cost, for sure? That's what I think. I'm going to vote no on it. I'd like to see it go on readings. I'd like to make a motion for it to go on readings, so we can consider this at the next meeting, since there's no urgency to it.
There's a motion to table or put on first reading? We could table it.
A motion to put on first reading.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion to place this on first reading, first by Mr. DeJohn, second by Mr. Mano. Roll call on the motion to place on first reading.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mr. Balstria.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Ordinance number 2021-29 has been placed on first reading.
Did he get them?
Ordinance number 2021-30, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ordinance number 2021-30, an ordinance amending Chapter 121 of the Codified Ordinances of the City titled Council by amending Section 121.01 regarding required readings of legislation. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Balestria, second by Mrs. Sabetta. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn.
No.
Mr. Balstria.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Balestria, second by Mrs. Sabetta. A discussion. All members of council should have received the email from Mr. Murphy addressing and simplifying this change. Mr. Murphy, would you like to add anything to this?
Only that the prior legislation, where it was moved to adopt and then there was another moving to place on first reading, kind of shows that I think this is really necessary. As I've said all along, once I read the legislation, it's on first reading. You don't need a motion to place it on first reading, and if somebody moves to place it on first reading and it's not successful, then the thing's kind of in limbo. So I cited to state law in the memo that I provided that you need read it on 3 separate days, and that's all you need in order to place it in a position to be adopted. So that's what this addition to this ordinance does.
Madam Chair.
Mrs. Teresi.
Excuse me. Why did you decide that we had to do this? Why did you decide we had to change this legislation?
I spoke with the clerk and spoke with the mayor, and it's something that we've been talking about for several years, that this is the way it should be done. So we presented it to council. It's up to council whether or not they want to do it this way.
So have we been doing it wrong for the last 50 years, 40 years, 30
I'd
years?
say so.
Really? Interesting.
Well, Mr. DeJohn.
So I guess I still don't understand. So Mr. Murphy reads it. You ask if we want to suspend the rules. If we don't want to suspend the rules, it goes on first reading.
Correct.
So how is this legislation now changing that?
Because up until this time, if there was not a motion to place it on first reading, then council questioned whether or not it was in fact on first reading. State law only requires it be read on 3 separate occasions. It doesn't require that there be a motion to place it on first reading. So, as I said, and this has happened before, if there is a motion to place it on first reading and that motion does not succeed, then what is the status of the legislation? Actually, it's still on first reading, whether or not you vote to do it. So this is clarifying that and streamlining things so that you can comply with state law and not have to worry about whether or not there's a majority to place it on first reading. It is on first reading once it's read. That's what state law says.
And why do we have to, like, change the wording? You said you're changing it from title to caption.
Well,
What's
it's, the state
semantics?
law refers to caption, by caption only. So that's more correct to say caption. If you wanted to keep it a title, that's minor.
So give me a, for example, with tonight, with this legislation.
Well, we
If
just-
this law was passed, what would happen?
So what we just did in that last one that we voted on, the ordinance, it would have just been placed on first reading. But what happened is then I had to take a motion and a motion to place it on first reading. Once we already suspended the rules, you need 5 to suspend the rules. So we had 5, we suspended the rules, but yet we still moved to place it on first reading. It was already on first reading because we didn't have enough in favor, you know what I mean?
No.
Or we wouldn't have had enough in favor if we would have
Would not have had
would not have had enough in favor to suspend the rules. It just gets put, we're just adding another step. So technically, we're just eliminating, and we've had a meeting we spoke on the phone. We had a meeting one time this year where 4 or 5 items all had to be put on first reading. So we had to ask for a motion, a second, and then a roll call, and it's a lot. And we had people here from other communities who were like, we don't do this there. In our community, after the meeting, they came up and asked, why did you have to ask? So they discussed it, and this is where we came with it. And Mike, or Mr. Belstray, you can say that when you were on council before, you were on this, didn't you
Yeah.
just move to suspend the rules right
I
away?
had similar questions, and what Mr. Ursi is saying is what I would hope to have adopted back then. When he reads the legislation, it's on first reading,
Okay.
okay? When you suspend the rules, you're suspending the 3 readings and to vote on it or to discuss it.
Correct.
That's plain and simple. If you don't suspend the rules, it's automatically on first reading.
So he'll,
So that's plain and simple.
That's.
Right, Paul?
That's it, yeah.
It's
I'm not sure
just-
you can
That's
explain
essentially
it
what I'm
any.
saying. There
all it
doesn't
is
need to
is
be a motion to
simplifying.
place on first reading.
Right.
It already is on first reading. And then, I think sometimes it was just a semantics in the language, motion to place on first reading. Well, it already was because the law director read it. So
Correct.
you're suspending, what I'm saying is you're suspending the 3 reading rules because you want to take action on it tonight.
so let me ask, with the marquee situation that just came up.
Right.
To suspend the rules, it failed, right? No, it passed. I was the only one that didn't want to suspend the,
If I could, suspend the rules has nothing to do with it,
I mean,
okay?
to put it on reading.
I read it, if you want to suspend the rules, you can suspend the rules, place it on third reading for passage. That bypasses the state law that says you have to read it on 3 separate
different
days.
times.
That's suspending the rules. What we're talking about here is just not having to go through the
Motion to place on first reading.
operation of moving to place it on first reading because it's already there.
It's already read.
Okay.
It's just simplifying it, that's all.
I'm
And
sorry
that's-
if that wasn't clear, but that's what I'm trying to say.
So it
This is
really has
Tracy.
nothing to do with bypassing or getting to the third reading any more quickly. You're not trying to,
No,
like, just
no,
kind of
not-
jam
not-
it down our throat.
Not at all.
Getting
I
it to third
read
reading.
it, and then
on
you
first
want to vote on it tonight, so you move to place it on, suspend the rules and place it on third
Third
reading.
reading.
And then if that gets passed by 5 people, then It's on third reading, and you're ready to adopt it.
Okay, otherwise it stays on first reading.
Otherwise, it stays on first reading. Yep. Thank
All
you.
right, now I'm lost. Where am
Well,
I?
there's a, yeah, I'm not sure what,
I just asked any
it was
member of
moved
council if
to
they had any
adopt, right?
questions. No, not yet. We didn't go there yet.
So you have a,
Okay, roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. Balstria,
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi,
Yes,
Mrs. Sabetta,
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn,
Yes.
Mr. Mano,
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Ordinance 2021-30 has now been adopted.
thank you.
Ordinance
regret it.
2021-31, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ordinance number 2021-31, an ordinance amending section 1155.08 of the codified ordinances of the city titled Effective Period of Permits relating to zoning variances. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
so moved.
Moved by Mrs. Tressi,
Second.
second by Mr. Belstria. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. DeJohn,
Yes.
Mr. Mano,
Yes.
Mr. Balstria,
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta,
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi,
Yes,
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
Moved.
Moved by Mr. Mano, second by Mrs. Tressi. This ordinance would simply just help extend the time from 6 to 12 months to get projects started that have been approved by the BZA, since things don't always seem to be moving as easily anymore. The ordinance states the specifics, and are there any questions from council?
Just
Mr.
wanted to
DeJohn.
see if Mr. Jameson had any comments regarding this.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
That's it?
That's it.
that was quite profound.
Yeah, just keep it simple.
So as opposed to having it approved for 6 months and having them come back
Right.
and asking them for an extension, you think?
Right, the way, during the pandemic, and for a lot of other reasons, it just complicates it more. So a year is an understandable time limit for all.
Okay. Thanks.
Are there-
One other thing, you're going to get another request to extend at the next meeting from Mr. Mulchin down there on Golden Gate Boulevard for his storage area, because he's, his variances have long since expired.
Okay. Are there any further questions? Okay. Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mrs. Sabetta,
Yes.
Mr. Mano,
Yes.
Mr. Balstria,
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi,
Yes,
Mr. DeJohn,
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. This ordinance has now been approved. Ordinance number 2021-32, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ordinance 2021-32, an ordinance providing for the organization of certain administrative departments and fixing the salaries and other benefits of certain officers and employees therein, and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Okay, so just so everybody understands, since we just passed the changing of the legislation this evening, it won't go into effect for 30 days. So I'm going to ask for a motion to place this on first reading this evening, to be reviewed by the Finance Committee. And Mike, I would like for you to set up a meeting as soon as you can with this. So do I have a motion to place this on first reading?
Move.
Moved by Mr. DeJohn, second by Mr. Belstria. Roll call on the motion to place this on first reading.
Mr. Mano,
Yes.
Mr. Balstria,
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn,
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta,
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi,
yes,
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Ordinance number 2021-32 is placed on first reading. And, I referred it to finance, Mr. Ballister. Just make, I know you're leaving for,
Right.
okay.
I gotta know.
Perfect,
I'll set
thank
up
you.
with Mrs. Fagan.
Okay, great.
don't forget me.
I won't forget you.
Ordinance number 2021-33, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ordinance number 2021-33, an ordinance providing for the issuance and sale of not to exceed $7,940,000 of bonds for the purpose of paying costs of constructing, reconstructing, grading, draining, curbing, and paving roadway improvements in the city, including all related improvements and appurtenances thereto, and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
Move.
Moved by Mr. DeJohn, second by Mrs. Teresi. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mr. Balstrea.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes?
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Balestria, second by Mr. DeJohn. Discussion. We all have received a memo explaining the issuance of these bonds for the above purposes that are stated in this ordinance. We'll open up any questions for Mrs. Fagan, if you have any. Okay, all good. Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes?
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mr. Balstrea.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Ordinance 2021-33 has been approved. This evening, we have no new motions. The law director has asked for an executive session. I need a motion to go into executive session. For the purpose,
I would request the motion to move into executive session to discuss pending or imminent litigation and appointment of a public official.
Move.
moved by Mr. DeJohn,
Second?
second by Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes. I'm sorry, yes, you have to do a roll.
Mrs. Lloyd, can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Balestrea.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes?
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi. Or Snyder.
Yes. Okay, it is now 8:20. We will now go into executive session. Thank you. council? I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move.
Moved by Mr. Balestreo, second by Mrs. Tressi. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. The meeting has now been adjourned.
Yeah, there you go.
Thank you, Mr. Teresa.
If you and Sue